one in the first. Testing. Perfect. Damn, look at these studs.
Hello. How's it going, guys?
Studs.
Hey, guys.
Plural. How's it going?
We're just waiting on Fresh. You all can hear each other, right? Because I can hear all of you.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a little low for me, Josiah. Everybody else is crisp.
I'm a little low. What about
No,
now?
you are coming in a little low.
Yeah, you're a little low for me, Josiah.
And there's somebody that has feedback.
Yeah.
I guess I can get rid of my name.
Why do you want to get rid of your name?
Well, it's not showing up. Like I got the up here.
Hey guys, you look adorable. They're clearly talking about me. Thank you.
Obviously.
That's
let's
right.
See.
We're just waiting
You know
on
what?
Fresh.
I don't want my first professional.
All right. Do I sound
also-
louder now?
Yeah. We also started before I could tie in, so I'm not.
It's okay. No,
Yeah.
you had a few hours. You had your chance.
True. Wait, could I do it like an hour ahead?
Absolutely. You've done it an hour ahead before.
Oh.
You've done that in the past. You can go into the
Don't look at
lobby
me.
after it's been made, set
Don't
it
look
up,
at
and
me.
then dip
I don't
out.
know.
Yeah, I did
I
that
don't know how it
literally
works.
5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
I don't know how any of this works.
No, you've been my co-pilot every step of the way.
I know it's a little sad. Like, I don't know. We've done this probably about like 20 to 30 times, I'd say, and I still haven't gotten the hang out of it.
There is bad feedback coming through my end. Is everybody hearing that?
Here, I'll
Just
try
me.
muting myself.
No, we can't hear you.
No,
I
I'm not
think
hearing
it's Cypher.
I'm checking if there's feedback, not if I can. Jesus. Nice going.
I turned my mic off. Is it still there?
Okay, wait here. I'll
Nope,
talk
I got it.
here.
I got it. It's my dumb ass had the stream open on another tab. I didn't realize,
Nice.
so I was hearing everything delayed 5 seconds later.
He's
Sorry,
one of our,
Cypher.
he's one
I
of our
apologize.
three viewers.
The attacks have already started, and the stream hasn't. So
Yeah.
Fuck.
Unbelievable. Oh man, we'll give. Well, we're not even at 9 yet, so we've got like 6 minutes, so we can do
Mhm.
some like pre-show banter
Sounds
or
good.
whatever.
I think Elle might be showing up. Maybe a little late, but yeah.
You guys go ahead and start the banter without me. I'm gonna go pee really quick.
You want to keep the mic on?
I can keep it on if you
Yeah.
want.
Please,
Yeah, it'd be
please
great.
do.
I
yeah,
mean, my God,
take it with
yeah.
you, please.
We could all
Yeah.
sing TLC. Don't go chasing waterfalls while he's making one.
Don't
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Now, Stacks, you're probably much too young to know who TLC is.
Yeah, it's that lovely carousel. Yeah.
The lovely carousel.
Yeah, TLC. I don't know anything about TLC.
Fresh. What up, buddy?
What up?
How's
Yeah,
it going,
my-
bro?
Discord kicked me out really quick. So that's why it took me so long.
Discord kicked you out?
Yeah, because I swapped back. My laptop broke, kind of, for like a day, and then I bought a new one, and then it decided to start working again. So I swapped back and forth between them, and it keeps kicking me out occasionally.
Gotcha. Damn, well, this is the like small to mid-tier Lefty Avengers streamers right here, all of us. I mean, my God, we got me and Falsers and Stacks and Fresh and Cypher's chair, his Streamlabs chair as he urinates in the background. Oddly Wired, thanks for the donation or the sticker. Appreciate that. By the way, Cypher, solid flow, man. Well done.
It was cute. We could hear it.
It was steady.
It had that like refreshing little tinkle. You know, it wasn't
was.
too long because sometimes
I mean,
it's
if
the
you could
problem when
hear
you
it, that's
listen.
weird because I turned my mic off. So
It sounded healthy. It sounded
It really
healthy.
did.
Like it
Yeah,
was enough
absolutely.
pressure where we were not concerned, but not so much where we thought you were trying too hard. It was good. It was really good.
100%. The
white people would
consistency.
talk like this.
So, All right. So we're going to start officially at 9. We got to come up with like a clever name or something like this. I just put like another Lefty Roundtable because I didn't know.
I mean, that's fine.
Left turn only or something like that.
Four white guys on a podcast.
There you
plus
go.
their friend.
Making a lot of assumptions there, my man. Yeah.
I'm not making any assumptions whatsoever. You and I both know
That's
this.
true. That's true. We've met. Yeah.
This is good. I don't think like in this space in general, there's enough like middle-aged white dudes doing podcasts. So I think it's important that we're here for like
Whoa.
representation.
I mean, on Twitch,
From 20 to 40, okay?
on Twitch and YouTube, you're not entirely wrong. So that's what's funny.
I'm just trying
If
to
you're
like
40,
wait,
you're a little bit of a grandpa on this.
nobody here's 40.
I almost am. You
No
keep forgetting
shot.
that I do not.
No
look-
shot.
Wait,
That's
Cypher,
true.
you're almost 40? I refuse to believe that.
I'm 32.
1985.
I'll out
Really?
myself.
Yee.
Here?
I'll out myself. I'm 32. I don't know if anybody else wants to give their age. Stacks just turned
27.
20. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in my mid-30s.
And what about you, Fresh?
Old
I like-
motherfucker.
I like the goatee.
Thank you. I'm 30. I work as an EMT, and all the college kids just went back to college and let me work with all the 19-year-olds. And like, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Like
That's good
even
to
when I was getting my class, there was a lot of 19-year-olds there. We were talking about shit. And I was like, 90% of you weren't even alive when 9/11 happened. I was like, I made a reference to the DC sniper, and they looked at me like I had two heads.
Yeah, no. So I've got 12 nieces and nephews, and my eldest nephew is 18, and they're trying to teach me slang, so like cap and turnt and all this stuff. So I've got a list on my phone, so I can try to keep it youthful. You know what I'm saying? You know,
Dead ass. Dead ass.
Yeah, on God, my man. Yeah. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and jump into it. This is a bit slapdash. You know, obviously the big piece of news was the impeachment inquiry into President Biden. So here's the situation, folks, for all 11 people watching, because I just announced this earlier today. I'll try to make it more formal as we go along. So we're all Lefty content creators. Some of us are streamers. Some of us are TikTokers. Some of us do like pre-recorded vids. Falsers has been MIA. I don't even know what he's doing anymore. Fresh, I think, has also been MIA, so I don't want to speak for either of them. But we are people interested in politics, political commentators on the left to one degree or another. And I thought it'd be cool to maybe once a week have like a sort of round table. We don't have to debate. Obviously, if we disagree, we can hash that out in real time. But for a couple of hours once a week, we would talk about political events. Very few culture war stuff I would prefer unless it pertains directly to politics. But yeah, so I'll go first. I'm Josiah with Pondering Politics, former, I guess you'd still consider me a Destiny orbiter, but I'm trying to do my own thing, content creation. I'm a unapologetically partisan progressive Democrat. I want Democrats to fight ruthlessly. I think the GOP is an authoritarian cult of personality, bad faith, disloyal. And I think we need to fight politics or play politics as ruthlessly as they do for more righteous ends. That's me in a nutshell. So we'll go to Falsers, then Cypher, then Staxiums, and then Fresh Faces.
I'm Falsers. I'm not a content creator. I'm just a drifter that bounces from panel to panel because I enjoy the discussions. But I am, much like Josiah, I am progressive. I am unashamed of my liberalism. I am forthright with it. I seek the utility in how we practice our policy and the goals we look towards. I think it's important to separate the ideal from what's realistic. And that's how I approach politics.
Awesome, man. All right, Cypher.
Yeah, everybody. So my name is Cypher. I lib left, sock dem, typical Twitch streamer. Been doing this as a podcast for about 2 years. Do news roundups, that sort of thing. I am a political nerd. When all things are said and done, I try to focus on policy and how politics are going on. So I know a bit about everything. Try to, anyways. So not tooting my own horn here. Everybody here is very knowledgeable. But that's where I come from.
Hey, before we pass the mic to anybody else, I'm just going to ask, that thing that you are working on, is that announceable yet, or are you still?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's announceable. I haven't gotten a firm commit from it, but it sounds like it's going to be. Do you want me to just announce it? I'll
Yeah,
just do it.
yeah, real quick.
So for people that don't know, I've been on Modern Day Debates about twice now, and I reached out to James to ask if he could set up a debate between me and Actual Justice Warrior, aka Sean Fitzgerald, about criminal justice. If you don't know me, I have a little bit of a background in criminal justice. That was what I was going to be a lawyer at one point, so I have a degree in criminal justice and political science. I also do statistics for a living. I am a data scientist. So I'm hoping to bring a liberal lefty position to Sean Fitzgerald and actually argue about policy rather than people that don't know shit about fuck when it comes to criminal justice. And so I will be debating him at Modern Day Debate Con live in person in Dallas on November 5th. I don't know what time it is yet. Again, the details aren't cemented, but it should be something along the lines of what causes crime? Is it culture? Or does crime cause poverty, or does poverty cause crime? That's the general gist of the debate topic. And I will be coming at it from the perspective that it's actually a vicious cycle, but poverty is the primary cause. So we're going to be doing that a lot. It should be about 2-hour debate or so. And if you're in the Dallas area at that time, come out. Show some support.
I'm hyped for you, man. Sean's big fish, and he's I know, like, in Destiny's community, he's one of the most respected conservative debaters. So I think that would be great. I think you're uniquely predisposed rather to confront him, especially with your data background. So good luck to you on that. So we will turn to Staxiums.
Hi, Staxiums. Mostly
you're muted.
Am I really?
No, just fucking with this.
I swear, I'm like, he does this every time, and he finds it the funniest bit he's ever done in his life. I very rarely believe him. Anyway, I'm Staxiums. I mostly make videos for TikTok and a little bit of YouTube. I do my main policy focuses are usually housing and trans issues, but I sort of hit a lot of different beats. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'll say this for Stax. He is my usual co-pilot. He was with me in Georgia when we helped Destiny canvass to get Senator Warnock, I almost called him Warlock, Senator Warnock reelected.
You're welcome.
And he has a really good, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can thank us for the 50 person majority in the Senate. But he also has really good philosophy videos on YouTube that you should definitely check out. And I think the most recent one is, what was it about? Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah, it was the trans one.
Yeah, it was basically a rebuttal to Michael Knowles' What is a Woman?
Yeah, it was kind of like it was a big deep dive into like the philosophy of language and how we use it, and what is a woman, kind of answering that question fundamentally. And it was a blast. I'm glad I made it. It's like 40 minutes long. You should check it out. It's on my YouTube. It's
really good despite him. All right, and now we've got fresh faces, new ideas. What's up, man?
Hey, I used to be a streamer. I now, like Falser, kind of pop between different debates, but they're most notably, you can find me, especially during the NBA playoffs, you can usually find me weekly on Productive Conversations. You can find me weekly being the co-host for Center Left Radio. You can find me occasionally on the left wing with the Independent Thought does. And then I kind of just bounce around Twitter occasionally. I thought my handle was something else. I got banned when Elon took over. So I had to do it. And now I kind of like do it when I can, but I'm an EMT now, so I don't have as much time to do the online stuff that I did.
He's like saving lives and that silly shit.
Well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I work for like a private EMT company, so currently most of what I do is transports.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're somebody who is unable to walk, or you're like end of life care, I'm usually the one who picks you up from the hospital and takes you to wherever you go.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so one of the things that Fresh and I bonded over early on is that we're both shit talkers on Twitter. We go after various right-wingers and just like constantly jab and poke. They could be big right-wingers who never respond to us, like Ben Shapiro, others like Rob Noor and others. So
I have Ben Shapiro responded to me one time, and it was after the that Supreme Court case.
Oh,
where he
I
said
remember
he's okay
that
with
now.
He's okay with being discriminated against because he's Jewish.
I forgot about that. Was that the one, the Supreme Court case where they
That was
basically
for the-
created standing for the 303C or whatever, the website, web designer? Yeah. So before we jump into the topic, I thought maybe we'd look at chat here and respond to a couple of things, and then we will deal with the biggest news of the day, which is the formal impeachment inquiry into President Biden. So let's see. Somebody says, howdy, Cypher. So somebody is pro Cypher in this chat. That's calls into question their judgment, but whatever. No, I'm just kidding. He also says, or she also says, they say, you turn me left round, baby. Left panel. Okay, that's a good one. Let's see. Gunsmoke says, wow, new show. Yeah, I would like to do this regularly. To get some different perspectives on things. Chris DeVera, who is somebody who I always thought it was a bot. Like I'm not able to determine this very well, but he's one of the my conservative critics in all my videos, like in the comment section. And Cypher, he says Sean will smash you. So whatever. There's that.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Sean is no slouch, so but I do my homework as Desperados.
The thing about Sean, it's funny. So when people, I've sparred with him a bit on Twitter. Obviously he knows his stuff with respect to like crime statistics and things, but I've as far as my understanding goes, like that is his one niche. Like he was talking about debating Sam Cedar, and Sam Cedar will talk policy, like any policy, all day, every day, like a wide range of topics. And so I thought it was interesting, the smugness associated with I went toe to toe with Sam Cedar. I mean, not saying that that's not a feather in your cap, but it's like you argued with Sam Cedar about the thing you talk about 24/7. I think on the other 100 topics, he'd clean your clock, no contest. So that's the only thing I'll say is you're engaging with Sean on his subject, right? Which is, criminal justice and things like that. Was there any interest in potentially engaging with him on another topic, or?
I mean, it really. I'll engage pretty much anybody on anything, assuming they come.
Well, I know you will. But do you think there was ever a chance to get him?
I honestly don't know. I went through James, the guy that's in charge of modern day debates. I literally, sometimes people, if you're like getting into this, just ask. All you have to do is just reach out, and sometimes people are like, yeah. And if there's the worst that happens is let her know, and you just have to blast somebody else. But yeah, so I haven't had any interaction with Sean directly about this. I've been through an intermediary. So.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, then that's that. So we'll just jump right into the topic. So I assume did everyone see Kevin McCarthy's comments about the where he announced the formal impeachment inquiry? Did anybody not see it?
Right. Yeah.
Did you saw it? Everybody saw it? Okay.
I did see it. Yeah, I don't know. You asked both questions. So
that's
yeah.
true. Well, I wanted to hit everybody at once. Okay.
Yeah. That's the best way to get information.
Exactly.
To ask the affirmative and then the negative immediately after each other.
And then how they answer, it offers the maximum clarity. So what we have is Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, announced a formal impeachment inquiry into the president about 12 days after, he said that if he did launch an impeachment inquiry, he would put it to a full vote. Apparently he changed his mind in the 2 weeks between the announcement and that proclamation. And that's the situation. That is right now the current political meta, on par with all the scandal surrounding Donald Trump. So,
and I assume, just to be, I don't think it was said explicit. I don't think Kevin McCarthy said explicitly, but this is basically just about Hunter Biden's, how much pull he has on Joe, right? On the president.
That's my understanding. I mean, it was a 3-minute announcement. He didn't like lay out a formal declaration. He said, listen, there's been some impropriety, some questions about, President Biden's involvement with Hunter Biden's business and whether or not the Biden administration was showing, patronage or favoritism towards the investigations into Hunter Biden, but he didn't like lay out specific facts. Now, I would argue there's a reason for that.
Because there aren't any.
But there are 3 committees that are going to be looking at it: House Oversight, House Judiciary, and House Ways and Means. So that's the predicate for this. Let's go in reverse order. Fresh, what do you think about this, man? I know you're not the world's biggest Biden fan. You probably see him as a useful means to an end compared to other politicians. But what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, so like my summation of Biden is basically he's a really good stepping stone for the next guy to be way more progressive. I think he laid the groundwork and is, especially on the labor stuff, has been more effective than a lot of us thought. But that's not what we're discussing. That's a different conversation, which we'll probably get to later. They got nothing, and this is not me saying this. This is what's his face?
Ken Buck?
No, not Ken Buck. Who's the other one?
Don Bacon?
Comer. Like
James
every
Comer.
other time he goes on to Fox News, they go, "What is the crime?" or "What is the thing?" He goes, "I don't know." Like, or he'll he's like, "I think maybe we kind of sort of have." They have nothing. He keeps saying they have nothing. They're like, when the Devin Archer testimony came out, the DNC Twitter account or the RNC Judicial account tweeted part of it. And there's a very telling section where literally the next line that Devin Archer says debunks everything that they said in that tweet. Like, there is they have another FBI agent coming out today saying that the IRS whistleblowers aren't accurate. That guy's own notes are saying things that aren't accurate to what he's saying. It is basically they're taking little things and they're making it buzzwords. That's why you'll see a lot of things like, oh, there's no evidence except his emails, his all the Maseratis, whatever the fucking list is. Now I don't know, but like they don't have anything. Remember, like 2 months ago they had tapes of this. What the fuck happened to the tapes?
They misplaced them. The tapes were in that the same thing that happened with Tucker Carlson when he had, remember those January 6 tapes or whatever. No,
it was Hunter Biden's laptop that got
It was
stolen.
Hunter Biden's laptop. That's what it was. It fell into the same void. So we'll go to Cypher then. So, Fresh just mentioned Devin Archer. Do you want to give like a quick recap of what that is?
Yeah. So
pretend Rob Knorr is here. Rob Knorr.
Rob is debating Destiny right now. Apparently, I just figured that out. So everybody is like, yeah.
I don't waste my time. Like I did that before I got banned. I'm not engaged with that.
Oh yeah, no, I don't care about Rob. But a long story short, I actually agree with counterpoints on this to a little bit of degree, because it's what I've been saying since essentially 2017 when this all came to light in the first place. What essentially happens is that Devin Archer is, for the most part, some business colleague of Biden, of Hunter Biden, and him and Hunter Biden and some other of the Biden clan got together and decided to create a lobbying firm, something that is completely legal. Because, when you're politically connected and you're a fail son, what else are you going to fucking do to make money? You're going to become a lobbyist. Everybody does this. It is low-level corruption that shouldn't happen, but it is low-level. Okay. And essentially what happened is that Biden was like, well, what does Biden bring? Well, he brings the Biden brand. And the Biden brand included Joe Biden, as well as his connections to the Senate and his ability to be Hunter Biden's specifically ability to be a lobbyist, because the Biden family has a bunch of connections. It's not just the fact that Joe Biden was vice president. It's that they have a lot of connections and they're well liked within the DC Beltway. And that's essentially what happened. Devin Archer during the committee was like, people were like, well, what was he selling? Well, he's selling the brand. What do you mean by that? Well, he was a lobbyist and, knowing DC Beltway and being a lawyer and having experience on boards and navigating international deals.
And I'll say this real quick. So this is exactly what Fresh was talking about when he was referring to the RNC or the GOP judiciary account, talking about the brand. The GOP was trying to spin Devin Archer's testimony that the brand exclusively referred to then Vice President Joe Biden. And Devin Archer said subsequently in that same testimony, just one line down, that when he means the brand, he means everything pertaining to, as you say, the DC Beltway. Joe Biden, the connections to Senate and Congress, because of course, Joe Biden has been in public office for decades, and Hunter Biden grew up in that area, or with his father. So it wasn't, and he's also an attorney. He also has connections to lobbying firms. So it was the whole thing. Just to clarify, it was not just Joe Biden, like the RNC suggests.
I'll make it quick so we can get other people in. But
Sure.
essentially, what it boils down to is all that what you just said. But also, even if it was just Joe Biden, okay, he's trading on his name. That was going on. He had a parlor trick where he was like, "Oh, you need some reassurance? Well, I know fucking everybody. Let me get my dad on the phone right now." We're talking about a person that was a drug addict that had like suicide attempts, that had a huge family fucking thing happening. He was going through a divorce and then a marriage and then another divorce. Of course, he has a special line to his father. His father loves his son. And so he would call up the number. He'd be like, boop, boop, boop. "Hey, Dad. Hey, how are you doing, son?" Blah, 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 right? "Hey, I'm with this guy and he needs some help." "Oh, okay. Well, I hope you're doing all right. All right, bye, Dad." Click. And then he would go be like, "See, we're good." And that's it. It was a lie.
So,
well, I think it's a lie, but
Well, so I'll turn it to Falsers now. So I know you've been, again, I don't know if you've been tracking political events with what you've been doing. You've been MIA as far as I know. But just as a side tangent on the Hunter Biden thing, since it's really the predicate for this impeachment inquiry, if there is such a predicate, what do you think of the claim that Biden should be impeached because of Hunter Biden's nepotism, especially when you consider the previous administration and Ivanka and Jared being actual White House employees with security clearances and White House influence and things like that? Like, do you think that undermines the credibility further of the nepotism angle that Republicans are complaining about?
I think in the world that we live in, everyone here on this panel, the answer is absolutely yes. I think to a rational person that's thinking critically and has an appropriate and sufficient amount of information about this thing, the answer is an obvious, overwhelming, and resounding yes. But I don't think that plays into the Republican strategy. I think the reality is these facts really do not matter to them, and they don't need to, because the objective is not to impeach Biden upon legitimate grounds for legitimate things that they can point to, because if they could point to them, as everyone so astutely pointed out in the beginning, they simply would. And we would know exactly where these impeachment hearings were pointing to, because that would be really good ammunition for these conversations and some of the elections that we've had since they've started talking about this. But they're not doing that. And so I think the goal, in a lot of ways, is to normalize this type of political mechanism, right? So when Trump was impeached, it was a big deal for big things that were very serious and on legitimate grounds. But if every time a party is in opposition to another party, or there's an opposition president in place, if they want to voice their disagreement by impeaching them, and that becomes normal, the gravity and the weight of that political mechanism has been completely diluted. And I think they're doing this partly in retrospect to defend Trump and stand up for him and make it known where they stand, and partly moving forward to make way for corruption, which is a bigger conversation. I'm not going to quite go down that rabbit hole, but I do want to point out a couple things real quick. I want to point out that not only did Kevin McCarthy say earlier in September that he was not going to do this without holding a vote, and he made a pretty strong and clear statement about it that was not remotely ambiguous. He put forth a resolution in 2019 when Nancy Pelosi was the speaker that said, and I've got it here, quote, that the full House of Representatives should be involved in a critical decision regarding the various stages of impeachment, and to do an impeachment vote, or excuse me, to bring forth impeachment without any debate or vote on such a resolution by the full House undermines the voting privileges afforded to each member and the constituents they represent, and represents an abuse of power that brings discredit to the House of Representatives. That is a direct quote from the resolution that Kevin McCarthy put forth in 2019.
So what's interesting, before I turn it over to Stacks, is I saw a clip of Kevin McCarthy being called out for this, not only because of his comments, but because of that resolution. And he tried to pivot to the second Trump impeachment. I know the first one was Speaker Pelosi had a full floor vote for the impeachment inquiry. I can't remember if the second impeachment, which happened after January 6th, I don't know if she put it to a full floor vote then. But he tried to pivot. He's like, sure, I said 12 days ago I would put it to a floor vote. Sure, in 2019, I went on this entire media campaign complaining about floor votes and then proffered this resolution. But Nancy Pelosi changed the game. Therefore, I'm justified in doing it in turn. So I do want to say, Cypher, I got your message there. And by the way, guys, feel free to use that private chat. Like if you want to bring something up while somebody's talking, like as a reminder or whatever, if you don't want to interrupt. So with that in mind, now I'm going to turn it to Stacks, because it's interesting. One of the things that Stacks and I constantly spar about, mostly half-heartedly, but I do think there's just a smidge of a disagreement there, is, so again, Kevin McCarthy is like, hey, I'm playing by different rules because sure, I said one thing, but I'm citing my opposition doing something else. Therefore, I'm justified in playing by a different standard. And Falsers also mentioned that many Republicans want to pursue impeachment as vindication for the fact that Trump was impeached twice. So my question to you, Stacks, is as somebody who's a real big stand for institutions and wants to be very mindful, we don't want to give the GOP any room here, any ammunition. Do you think that Democrats did play a role in normalizing impeachments, but by the 2 impeachments against Trump, number one? And number two, do you think that given that we have yet another example of the GOP bending their own standard when it's convenient, does that make you more, less, or not inclined at all for Democrats to start doing the same?
Well, what I will say, so your question was, did Republicans sort of normalize impeachment?
Did Democrats normalize impeachment against, because they impeached Donald Trump twice?
I don't think that
that's their argument.
I wouldn't call justice like normalization. I don't think that if someone arrests someone for committing an obvious crime, that they're normalizing punishment. If someone committed a crime, I like let's follow the rules that occurred. What I will say is that I'm definitely at a disadvantage here because me and Josiah have talked about this a lot. A lot of the news articles that have sort of come up on Hunter Biden, I've said, why do I care about any of this? I've done almost no deep dives on Hunter Biden because I know that, I'll look into it if someone can bring a substantial charge. And even right now, when it comes to impeachment, I still can't even see what exactly people are frustrated about. And I think that speaks quite a bit to the nature of the impeachment and to the nature of the charges. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe once the charge comes up, they have this smoking gun that no one was able to find, that they have hidden under their pillows. And if they have that, maybe Biden committed a crime and we should impeach him. But if not, if this is all a facade, like this is a joke. I don't know what else to say. Like I'm excited to be proven wrong. We'll see if I'm going to be proven wrong. I very much doubt we are. I think, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so you reject the argument that they offer, which is that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You impeached our president twice in one term. Therefore, it normalizes impeachment. It reduces the burden. You categorically reject that outright.
I don't, because they did not meet, as far as I could see, Biden's whatever Biden did not match what Trump did. I don't think that there was a talk of a quid pro quo with a country at need, which was Trump's first impeachment, and an attempted insurrection, which was the second impeachment. I don't think that these are even comparable. I would love to, what's the Republicans actually charge Biden? I would love to see what exactly the charges are, but unless they're of a substantial size, we didn't normalize anything. We normalized when something really incredibly destructive something incredibly destructive happens to our institutions, that we punish it. And I think that that's a good thing to normalize. And right now, I don't think that Biden has done any substantial damage to our institutions. I'd love to see what the Republicans have, though. I doubt they have anything.
So let's turn to some comments. If you, Fresh, if you want to say something. Yeah.
So I also think that the fact that this is the first impeachment brings up the weakness of Kevin McCarthy and the chaos in their caucus right now. I think because they fell on their face during the election and they didn't have the margins that they wanted. Like, my thought was, if the Republicans get to the House, Joe Biden is going to be the most impeached president, just so they can no longer say that, like, oh, when people refer to Trump, the two-timed impeached president. Like, it doesn't
Right.
matter what they'll just like they'll impeach him for the border, they'll impeach him for not seeing enough of Hunter Biden's penis, or for the whatever, for using the fuel reserves. But the fact that this is the first one just shows you how that they have nothing. Like, they can't even get their clown car in order to make it look like this is such a big deal.
If I could add something real quick to that, because I think he's making a really important point here, and I see a lot of comments in the chat talking about, well, what if Biden did something bad?
So that's the thing. Don't address the comments yet, because I want to scroll back up and do them in chronological order. But I am
no worries.
I want that to be addressed. So actually,
Sure.
we're going to start with the first falsers comment. So this one was directed at you by, again, the conservative guy in my YouTube comment section. Well, falsers, all bets are off. Y'all did it first. Falsers, I'll give you first shot at that.
Perfect. That's a perfect landing or a spring pad for what I was about to talk about here. Here's the reality. We did it again with an insurrection to overthrow the government, right? To deny the democratic process, to not peacefully turn power from one president to another. Okay. That's a pretty serious thing. What do the Republicans have here? They have, well, maybe not the president, but his son might have done some illegal things. And we can't really tell you what they are yet, or where the evidence is that shows those specific things, but he might have done something that maybe was connected to the president. And this fantasy world that Republicans are living in, where they're like, well, this is part of a bigger strategy. This is all part of that. We're playing 4D chess out here. You guys are delusional. The party can't even get in line with itself in one congressional chamber. Okay. The House does not agree with itself. Even today, you've got Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy going at it. Kevin McCarthy can't even agree with his own damn self from 1 hour to the next, okay? There are too many warring factions in the Republican Party, and you damn well should believe if there were anything there, they would unite in a heartbeat to point at Joe Biden and show us what that thing was.
So next one goes to Staxiums, because this one was directed at him when he was talking. Because so Stax, you made the point repeatedly that nothing that Republicans can point to comes close to being as unethical, corrupt, or dangerous as what Trump was impeached for. But Liberty Twitcher says, does what Biden did have to match what Trump did? Does it need to be comparable?
Yeah, I think we're sort of picking at what I'm saying here, because we all kind of agree with the extent of what I'm saying. If someone murders someone and they get 25 to life, and then someone pickpockets someone, and you compare these two events, you would say, well, these are completely two, yes, you can murder 12 people, and that's 12 times worse, and you'll still get 25 to life. There is definitely a threshold where that impeachable bar is set. Biden hasn't met that, as far as I could see. Now, again, Republicans can just claim that they're keeping their cards close to their chest, and they're just waiting until the charges actually roll through. Let's see it. Let's see anything that you're talking about, because when it came to before Trump's impeachment, we knew damn well what they were talking about before the impeachments happened. We went, oh yeah, obviously the attack that happened on the Capitol. I'm not saying that they shouldn't impeach, but they need to have a good reason, and they need to meet some basic threshold rather than just pickpocketing someone sometime. I do think that it needs to be some substantial reason to impeach a current president. I think that standard is somewhat high, and certainly what I've seen, it hasn't been met.
Okay.
Also, another thing to
Sure.
his point about when Trump gets in trouble, he is the most guilty man. He like Bolsonaro is the most sick man when it comes to COVID. Every time Trump does a crime or something that's negative against him, he comes out on television and says it. In reference to the first impeachment, he said when he was, when he does his tarmac talks, he's like, yeah, I told Ukraine to go look for it. I also want China to go look for it. Every single thing that he got impeached for. I mean, obviously the January 6th was pretty obvious. The first one, and then all of the subsequent indictments, he's on he's the world's dumbest criminal.
He really is. Yeah,
Hmm.
he really is. It says something about his wealth and privilege and power, though, that despite being the world's dumbest criminal, he's managed to avoid any meaningful repercussions for his various crimes, at least so
As of
far.
yet.
Well, it's
Yeah.
because, I mean, part of that is to be clear is that some of the stuff that he's done while corrupt isn't criminal. Not just talking about the stuff that he did while in office. Clearly, some of that stuff is illegal, like keeping classified documents,
Sure.
pressuring people. But like a lot of the stuff that he did, like scamming people out of money and all that stuff, it's not criminal. It could be civil. So
Yeah,
But
well, that's why like he has like 13 civil cases
yeah,
that he gets to go to like every week. But nobody cares about them because other than the E. Jean Carroll one, none of them matter.
yeah. Not to be too much of a gadfly though. If what Republicans are accusing Biden of is true, then I don't know if it would necessarily be impeachable because it happened before he was in office, and there's some constitutional legality about that. The Supreme Court ruled in a separate case back in like 1890 or 1920, somewhere in that time range, that you can't impeach somebody or remove somebody from the House for a crime or something they did before they were in the House. So I'm
Right.
sure that that's the way it would go with that. But if what he did, if he's guilty of what they're accusing him of, again, there isn't any definitive evidence of this. It's all conjecture. Then it would be like, okay, this is fucked, right? Like, I
No.
think we all agree with that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Listen, if Joe Biden, as vice president of the United States under Barack Obama, was changing or influencing U.S. policy to benefit his son directly or corruptly, or his son's interest directly or corruptly, absolutely, that would be fucked. There's no question about that. Not this interesting thing about the left broadly and the Democratic Party in general is I don't think that you would have nearly as many people just resolutely defending President Biden on those charges if there was compelling evidence to prove it, the way that the MAGA cult, Cult 45, does with Trump. Which, and I know I use language like this all the time, but it's true. It's one of the reasons why the left in general and the Democratic Party specifically is just superior. It is better. It's factually better on its very worst day than the Republican Party and the right are in their very best, morally, ethically, intellectually, as matters of policy, just every which way, in matters of integrity. More Democrats and members of the left would abandon Biden if there was compelling evidence of the corruption that has been alleged by Republicans than has ever been the case. Trump said it famously. You could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. He prophesied this 7 years ago. You could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. Go ahead, Fresh.
Well, like that's the thing. Like if you look at every single impeachment or every single indictment that came down before it was unsealed, it was these are political charges. He didn't do anything wrong. Everything is fine. We didn't even know what he had done. We didn't know what the charges were. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. And every single one of us has said, and this is the same thing if you talk to somebody in 2016 about Hillary, is like, if there's evidence, or this is the better one. Like every time they indicted Trump, one of these crazy, usually Charlie Kirk, would go, lock up Clinton and Obama. I was like, okay, go ahead. Like if you got the goods, do it. Like we're not going to say the reason we're saying there's nothing there is because there's nothing, like they don't have anything to show us. If you could show us something, show it to us. It's blinders versus being willing to look at it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's here going to stand by Biden if these charges are legit, whatever charges there are. If it's legitimately that he was leveraging his power as president to influence, I don't know, I don't even know what exactly the charges are, but just some like ambiguous corporate power or something like that. I don't think anyone here is going to stand by him. We'll say, yeah, you know what? Fair enough. Fuck that guy. If he was doing that, absolutely. But you don't get to just conjure up charges because your previous guy was a criminal. Sorry, don't elect criminals next time.
One of the things that I've observed, and you tell me what you all think, and then again we're going to address some more comments because there are a lot of people who are engaging with what you all are saying. One thing that I have complained about constantly in my debates with conservatives and centrists is this idea that there's some sort of like cosmic moral law which dictates that if there's some sort of transgression by one party, there must cosmically be an equal transgression on the part of another party. And sometimes I think that what people just don't want to grasp is that in conflict, be it political conflict, military conflict, interpersonal conflict, sometimes one belligerent, one party is just a lot worse than the other. And again, we can go to classic examples like the Civil War. There was no equivalence between the Union and the Confederacy, even though the Union, you can call into question the ethics of like General Sherman's March to the Sea or President Lincoln suspending the writ of habeas corpus. The Second World War is a great example. FDR imprisoned hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans, which was pretty fucked, but he wasn't morally comparable to Hitler, right? Sometimes in conflict, there is actually a problem uniquely with one side compared to the other. And I think that that's what fuels so much of this, is this idea that, okay, well, there's nepotism and corruption in the Trumps. Therefore, there must be something comparable by the Bidens. And we're obligated to scrutinize Hunter Biden, who's a private citizen. I think Falsers brought this up and Cipher brought this up. And so did Fresh. This idea that Hunter Biden deserves as much scrutiny as any of the Trumps, because it's just balance. We complain about the Trumps a lot, and Hunter Biden did this thing. I think every single one of us, myself included, when we comment on this thing, it's important that we do, but we also play a role a bit in contributing to that false equivalence. One thing that I've said that I'm going to start doing moving forward in debates that involve Hunter Biden is I'm going to quickly address the point and then spin it to Jared Kushner. I'm not interested in talking about Hunter Biden at length more than I am Jared Kushner, who was a White House senior advisor. So that, and if anyone wants to comment on that before we turn to the comments themselves.
Yeah, I would.
Go to Fresh first.
I actually do think that they should take a page out of the Republicans' book. Like when they were in the minority, they had like whistleblowers for all types of nonsense. Whether they turned out to be Chinese spies or not is not the point. Like they should really be doing, like Jamie Raskin and people like that should be at least attempting to make an argument for that, like looking into like, hey, they're worried about corruption with nepotism. Let's look at people who are actually in the government and talk about this. Like we know he got the $2 billion payout. There's evidence about the the hotel being used to money. Like bring these points up, like as you said. It's like you can easily, and it's not, we're just going after people. He's in the government. Like there was a reason people didn't go after Don Jr. is because Don Jr. was just a clown on TV.
Right. No, 100%. Well, hang on, before go ahead, Fresh.
Yeah.
Or go ahead, Stacks. Sorry.
Yeah. So I do think that these centrist opinions about sort of like looking at both sides equally, it's coming from kind of a truth, which is you should be able to scrutinize your own side as much as you do the other. And I do think that that's true, right? If, for example, Biden attempted an insurrection on the Capitol, I would say we should impeach him just as much as we did Trump.
Well, they did yesterday.
What was that?
There was the what was it? The one of those climate groups went into Speaker McCarthy's office, and I was told that's an insurrection now.
Oh yeah, they're going to do that.
I don't think that's what's considered an insurrection. But.
No, anytime what they're doing, we can talk about that separately. I don't want to do it.
But there's this equal side where you should be able to criticize your own group, and I do think that that's actually important. Where you look at people on my side who will make really poor arguments, and I'll step in and correct them, or where I feel like people are being hostile or like unnecessarily aggressive. I do think that it's important to step in and say, hey, this isn't great. I don't like that we're doing this. And I should be willing to criticize my group as much as I do the other side. But that doesn't mean that because I criticize the group that I need to go like do this deep dive till I find some random one person who did something a tenth the size and then exploded up to the size of the other. That is not justice. That is not equality. That's not how anything should that just doesn't make any sense.
Sure. So we'll go to Cipher, and then we'll go to Falsers, and then we'll turn to some of the comments, because again, I know people are agreeing and disagreeing, but people are engaging, so we'll respond to that. So Cipher, go ahead, and then Falsers.
Yeah, I got two things. So just real quick. So Fresh Faces basically brought up the whole Trump hotel thing. I think that is the clear, obvious case of a lot of smoke, at least, if not outright corruption, if not violating the emoluments clause. And if you care at all, at all about Hunter Biden making money off his dad's name. You should care about this hotel, because as soon as Trump left office, they closed that bitch. That it stopped operation. The building was sold. He was selling rooms for $10,000 a night and claiming, oh, this is just the cost of the room. This is just, we're not making any money off of this. Bullshit. Like, they can say that is the cost of the room. They're making money off of it because they can pay themselves a lot of money to run the hotel. They can do all this stuff, and therefore they're not making a profit off of it. So that's one thing. And the other thing, I think there is like a lot of false equivalency that is being done by people just in general, like Stacks is saying. And if we want to play that game, we can play that game. But I'm not one to play it. So that's it.
Falsters, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I agree with what Cypher just said there at the end. I'm not really for the whataboutism type politics. I think that there's use in it to what Stack said of being able to like examine ourselves and call ourselves out for the things that are wrong. And I agree with the other people on the panel tonight that if Hunter Biden has done something wrong and illegal, if Joe Biden has done something wrong and illegal, investigate him and let's take the appropriate steps from what we find. That's all good and well. But I think that it is also useful to be able to point to the gravity of these issues and not just acknowledge that both sides has issues, to show hypocrisy on some of these things, right? So for these Republicans that are really torn up about the Hunter Biden story, Cypher just laid out a great counterpoint of the hypocrisy that's going on with some of that. I think that our nation as a whole and our voters, we have an accountability problem at large. And I think when we look at a party that we've committed ourselves to and our ideals to, and we've signed on to their platforms, and we see that they've done something wrong, it is really hard for us to hold ourselves accountable to that. And it is far easier to deflect and say, yes, but what about XYZ? And it's not only an accountability problem, but it's a really good scapegoat if, frankly, you're not super informed and caught up on some of the issues, right? So if you can't discuss something in depth and get to the substance of a conversation, it's really easy to deflect with these things, and it's a really effective strategy. And we see it more and more and more as people have these conversations more and we get more interconnected.
Yeah, so I'll say, to kind of wrap up this particular thing, it may end up coming up again. So to be clear, I do agree also with Stacks that the left and the Democratic Party as a whole still have a moral obligation, and really a practical obligation as well, to try to self-police as much as we possibly can, which is why my position on Hunter Biden is, when people are like, we're going after Hunter Biden, I'm like, I don't care. That's fine. Yeah, if he's guilty of whatever. That's 100%. The thing. That's the difference between us and you all, Cult 45. You would never say that about Trump or Ivanka or Jared or whoever. You would just be predisposed to fight it every step of the way. But then I also point out Hunter Biden, again, a civilian son of the president who's never held a position of power, has been investigated for years by two branches. He's been under investigation by the executive branch since Obama, then under Trump, then under his own father. And then he was investigated by Senate Republicans in 2019 and 2020, and now House Republicans as well. How many more investigations do we need? Do we need a fifth one? Do we need a sixth one? When do we start holding people in power to the same standard that we hold those who are not in power? We used to believe, and I say this all the time, I said it on WIC panels and whatever, we used to believe in the Uncle Ben Spider-Man ethic. With great power comes great responsibility. The implication there being the more power you have, the more scrutiny and more responsibility you have. So my position is, my reductive, if I were to summarize it, is, again, investigate Hunter Biden if he's guilty, prosecute him or whatever. But we need to now focus on Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner and Hunter Biden are not on the same moral playing field. Jared Kushner deserves 10,000 times the scrutiny that Hunter Biden did, if only because he was a government employee, a senior White House advisor who wielded the power of the government. He was effectively the de facto ambassador to the Middle East on behalf of Donald Trump. And going to Fresh's point, Democrats in 2022, for whatever reason, I don't know if I would need to brush up on it, they opened an investigation into Jared Kushner in like June 2022. I think it was pretty late in the game, but that's where I say the frustrating thing is Democrats have to start appropriating some of that Republican ruthlessness. Republicans were forecasting from day one, if we take the majority, we're going to investigate Hunter Biden again. I want that same energy from Democrats, especially when Jared Kushner is actually fodder for an investigation much more justifiably than Hunter Biden. I want them to hit the ground running. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Not 6 months into a majority, 6 hours into a majority. I want a comprehensive investigation, a ruthless, never-ending investigation into Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, and Donald Trump to make the case. Republicans, you can either fight us fairly or you can fight us unfairly. But regardless, you're going to get your ass kicked no matter what. You can either lose to us in a fair fight because our ideas are better and we're more popular, or you can lose to us in an unfair fight because we're going to start playing the game like you. Does anybody want to say anything about that before I jump to the next thing?
I want to push back just a smidgen, just on the notion that we should really focus in on Jared Kushner, because while I agree with you that there is definitely some not so good things probably going on, it looks very bad, right? I think we have been walking and chewing gum. In fact, I think our mouths are so full of gum from Donald Trump that we can't possibly fit another little chiclet of Jared Kushner in without overflowing, right? So the strategic effort, we only have so many resources. We can only put forth so many news stories at a time and dedicate ourselves to however many conversations at a time with any amount of focus, right? And so I think Jared Kushner in that situation, while important, can wait until we get the big ones out of the way with Donald Trump, both in terms of utility and strategy.
And also, if you're going to do the Jared Kushner thing, you don't do it as we're doing it in retaliation for Hunter Biden. We're doing it as a way to craft rules in order to stop officials or senators or whoever from personally benefiting from their positions in order to remove corruption. That's how you would phrase it. You would say, okay, we're doing
100%. No, 100%. I'm saying from just an operational, that's what I'm saying. There's a moral impetus to pursuing Jared Kushner that we would not
be the all-consuming thing. You could, even if there was some IG who would be responsible for this, you put it on them. It doesn't need to be
100%. Well, wait, again, 100%. That's why I said walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm not saying grind government to a halt to single-handedly and single-mindedly pursue Jared Kushner. But the nature of, professional politics in DC on a national level is you have multiple, committees and various organs of Congress are working parallel investigations, parallel pursuits at the same time. To be clear, I'm not saying that this should be the equivalent of the January 6th committee, which was the crown jewel of investigative effort during the Democratic House majority. But I do think it should be something that's going on in the background immediately, as quickly as possible. And what I think Democrats and the left, because we do respect institutions more and we show grace almost to a fault, I think when it comes to the Trumps, be it Donald Trump or Jared Kushner or Ivanka, we have been so slow, not just in Congress, but even in the executive branch to do anything about it. There was a great expose in the Washington Post some 3 or 4 months ago where multiple DOJ officials have gone on the record and said that the investigation into Trump pertaining to January, from the executive branch, was slow walked. I'm sure some of you agree. Merrick Garland took his time, and with both the National Archives and the documents thing, as well as the insurrection. We are just predisposed to showing the opposition a grace that, number one, they don't deserve, and number two, they never reciprocate. And what I'm saying is we have to stop doing that. This is something that is hurting us politically. It adds to the many other disadvantages that the Democrats experience. There's no excuse for Merrick Garland, for example, to squash investigations into Donald Trump. Then when Donald Trump announces that he's running for the presidency, then oh shit, we got to appoint a special counsel. And basically Jack Smith is trying to make up for a year and a half of lost time. We have to stop doing that. They would never, ever, ever do that with us. Same thing with the documents. The National Archives worked behind the scenes for nearly 2 years to get Donald Trump to turn over documents. They would never show Joe Biden that grace. They would never show Barack Obama that grace. Why should we, when it's not reciprocated and it's being weaponized against us? That's my question.
The answer is both, because we're better and it's all they have. It's performative. There's no need to be performative about these things. You can focus on the little things and put them off, or you can bring them when they're relevant and then spend the rest of the time doing this. And I think this will be part of my point later if we get to the Brianna thing, because it comes into third parties. But it's performative, and it's a waste of time. Like it doesn't help anybody. Yeah, and you're right. Chris is the answer is because we are better. Like you cannot name a piece of legislation that has passed since the Republicans have taken power that has affected the American people in any positive way.
Yeah.
Or let's name one that happened that isn't non-banning gas stoves.
I think it's a question of balance here, though. So, like, when we look at things that Republicans do, like, for example, where they chose to ignore precedent with a Supreme Court nom and then immediately reversed course on their own precedent, right? So, like, things like that. When we start to reciprocate these really egregious, unprecedented political things, we erode the precedent and our political traditions and our norms, right? So it's a balance between how much are we willing to let Republicans erode forever and how much do we fight back and kind of embrace that tit for tat political warfare so that we're effective enough so they don't do it anyway, right? And so I think we're trying to do it just enough where we can stay in the game and stay ahead, but get back to some of the integrity and normalcy that we once knew.
Cypher, were you going to say something?
Yes, because I disagree.
With me or with Falsers or
with
Fresh?
Falsers.
Or... Oh,
with
okay.
Falsers, what he just said. So you got my juices going here because I do not want to rely on norms. Norms, the first person that breaks norms always gets the advantage. So norms are shit. They're only as good until somebody says, hey, why are we following that? Is it against the law? No? Oh, well, then fuck that. Let's go do what we want to do. I want to use, they'll say, I want to use the raw exercise of power to get what I want. And that's exactly what Trump and the Republicans have been doing since Trump came to office in 2020.
I don't think you believe that, and I'll tell you why.
No,
I don't think that's your
position. Let me finish.
Sure, go ahead.
So the reason I think that's what they're doing. So if that's what they're doing, then what we need to do is do the same thing, however, and offer up a way to get out of this mess. So this comes to the Supreme Court thing, right? I think that Biden and Democrats, if they ever get to 55, 56 votes or whatever, get rid of the filibuster, pack the court. And instead of packing the court, what you say is like, look, we want a constitutional amendment to make it so where nobody can do this ever again. Or we're going to pack the court and shove a lot of things that you don't like down your fucking throat. And then they use that as a leverage to get fixes to turn norms into rules and standards. And that is what we need to do. That is the strategy that liberals and lefties need to do going forward on this.
So I think my point of view on this is, and by the way, I agree with you on the Supreme Court and packing the court and like the way that whole thing played out, it's almost like begging for some reciprocation at this point. And I think there are a lot of people that are unsatisfied with how little has happened. But even on the tail end of that, your prescription was put a mechanism in place to get back to that norm, right? So I don't think the question is like a resistance of the norms themselves. It's just a measure of how much are you as an individual, am I as an individual, is the Democratic Party as an entity willing to sacrifice those norms versus getting ahead and starting to weaponize some things that we haven't done before, some political mechanisms we might be able to make some ground with that are not.
I think we can't be in a position to rely on the Republican Party's largesse, and I think that's what we've been in. The idea, norms require reciprocal good faith, and that's the problem. The GOP is by and large a bad faith, disloyal opposition party. Now, I agree that we shouldn't recklessly break norms to the extent that they do, because, for example, people say that Mitch McConnell's a great strategist. I think he's a very effective tactician, like short-term games, one or two moves ahead, but he has done serious long-term damage to the integrity and bipartisanship and statesmanship of the Senate. But we'll use the Supreme Court thing as an example. I've long advocated for, if we are ever in a position where you have a Republican president and a Democratic Senate, and there's a Supreme Court vacancy, I think Democrats should say, you're not getting this filled, period. You did it to us. There's no reason to believe you wouldn't do it to us again. As a matter of fact, you kind of screwed us 2 or 3 times, depending on how you want to look at it. You screwed us with Garland, then you screwed us with Amy Coney Barrett in 2022. So we owe you 2. And you can say, well, no, please don't do it to us because we did it twice, but we'll never do it to you again. No. We have to make the point that there has to be a consequence for you doing this. No one here would ever play a game against an opponent who assumes the authority to change the rules of the game whenever it's convenient. We would eventually say either you can't have that power anymore, or we're also going to adopt that power. But no one would ever just put themselves at the mercy of the opposition. I think that that's completely justified. Now, some people would and have said, well, Josiah, if we do what Republicans have done to us, it's just going to continue to escalate. And if that's the case, so be it, because I would rather have that where we actually have a chance of winning and making meaningful political gains for our constituents, including conservative constituents, by the way, than again, just submitting to Republican largesse. I don't think that that's tenable. Does anybody disagree with that? The idea that, we can't just submit ourselves to their mercy. We have to do something to stop them from pulling those sorts of stunts, either with some sort of codification of rules or some retaliation that humbles them. So there has to be something. Does anybody disagree with that? Go ahead, Stacks. I can.
No, I can't. I mean, well, all I'll say is that if we don't codify those norms and we just allow that sort of reciprocal tactic where we just go back and forth, I think that would destroy the country. But I can already feel you boiling. The Republicans are kind of already doing that. So, like, I will say that sounds like a nightmare situation, but we're also in a nightmare situation right now. I really want to fucking codify these norms because I think they're just being broken constantly. I 100% agree that what happened to Garland and what you mentioned ACB as well. Because
they created the expectation that, listen, during an election year,
so they set up a norm. Right.
Then broke their own norm.
Right. You can't both have.
No, I totally agree. Sorry, I forgot that ACB also happened. Yeah, this is regardless. That just sounds like a nightmare situation. But I agree with you that they're basically just pulling out rules out of their ass and then just saying that this is just how they operate when it's absolutely never been the case.
No,
yeah. I don't disagree with you. I just like that idea of like. Just that back and forth scares the shit out of me a little bit for like a democracy and basically anything that leans in that direction scares me, but also right now kind of scares me. I think that a lot of the ways that, just especially when it comes to Supreme Court nominations, I think that's the clearest answer where this is a very clear division of powers, separation of powers that has been completely thwarted, which is kind of what our country is built on. And that just scares me a little bit.
Fresh, let me ask you, because you didn't weigh in on this, but I'm curious. And given what happened with the Supreme Court under Republicans, if my counterfactual exists, where one day, maybe in the next term, we have a Democratic Senate, a Republican president, and there's a Supreme Court vacancy, would you support what I propose, which is Democrats not allowing that vacancy to be filled in retaliation for what's happened before, just to make the point? Or would you say that they need to go ahead and fill it? Or what would you say?
I think if they have the votes or they have the majority that they can block it, have the hearing, make the point that like this is just another person, and be very clear about this. Like we have now enough evidence of the Republican Supreme Court nominees going to the committees and just straight up lying to them about what they believe is precedent, and making that like a really interesting point of like contention for why they would shoot this person down, because we know that at least two, if not all three of them, said that Roe was settled.
Super precedent,
and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Obviously, we can't. Would I like to rebalance the court by holding something up? Yeah, but like we can be clear that there will never be a Democratic nominee for the Supreme Court that will make it through with a Republican majority. Like they're just never going to allow it to happen again.
Yeah. So well, hang on, just to be clear. So I just want to make sure I understand you. So you would, in a situation where there was a vacancy under a Republican president with Democrats in the majority, you would have a hearing for their nominee and you would vote for them, or you would have the hearing, you wouldn't vote for them, you would just make the hearing about other issues. If they're going to put whatever
I don't know what the heritage, who the next head on the heritage list is. Have a hearing and then just shoot them down. I don't care. But make it like a point about how these and don't just do it because, oh, you're a Republican, we're not going to allow it. Do it like, look, this is the type of thing that this committee has allowed to be trampled over. This idea that, you know, there's norms that the Supreme Court can just lie to us about. And that's unacceptable. And we don't believe that you are truthful to your word based on precedent from people of your ilk, based on this list that has come. You tie it back into the ongoing corruption that is Leonard Leo and whatever the fuck the Heritage
Foundation or Federalist
Sure.
Society. Society.
What I will say is I do think that there are cases in which I wouldn't support it, but I think that the best case scenario is where you have that you basically just dismiss them the same way McConnell did, and then you immediately bring forward a bill that codifies all of the Supreme Court regulations or norms, right? Not just you know, when exact like what McConnell did to Garland and to ACB, but also to like recusing yourself, which is obviously a really like contentious point right now when it comes to Clarence Thomas. I think a lot of the Supreme Court just sort of exists on norms right now.
Sure.
And I do think that when you push that, you have to forward that with an answer and say, hey, here's the bill where we're codifying all of that. So I would definitely support that as the path forward. But without that bill, I'd be very hesitant. Like if they don't agree to codify the rules, and they're like, well, we'll just always have the power. I'm worried about that world. Is all I'll say.
Let me ask you this, and maybe one of you weigh in on this, or all of you. I'm trying to think of what would persuade me. So I'm hearing some of you say, you know, do it a different way or use it as leverage to codify certain norms or whatever in terms of like legislation and parliamentary rules. I'm trying to think here, but there's a little devil on my shoulder saying, Josiah, no, we can't do that, because if we do, then we'll be codifying it with a Republican advantage already cemented. Because I'm thinking to myself, okay, hey, there's a vacancy on the court. There's probably still going to be a conservative majority on it, even if that vacancy isn't filled. So if you codify legislation, that may suck for Republicans because they're like, damn, you know, that's not a loophole we can exploit down the road. But we already have the advantage. So if we codify it the way it currently is, it will still have a Republican advantage. I think I would need to hit them back. I would need to get the last hit in and then end the fight.
So I have an answer to all that. So I have three things into a constitutional amendment that are necessary. One, a complete limit on how many justices on the Supreme Court, whether that is a hard limit like 9 or an expansive limit like some sort of like if there is a new federal district based on population, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. So that's one. The other one is term limit or a serving. Term limit doesn't really work, but there's only one term and you put a certain number of years on it. I think anywhere between 12 and 16 years lines it up with presidential elections, and that way that we have more presidential elections going forward. And then the other one is all current Supreme Court justices literally draw straws on national TV. And if you get the short end of the straw, you retire at the end of the year. And then it just goes by every 2 years, another one just down the line. And then that's what you have. And then we have a new slate of justices. They are going to better reflect where we are in the current moment. And then every 12 to 16 years, you get a new justice, and it lowers the stakes of partisan politics for Supreme Court justices because they know that one president will at least get a pick every so often, every 2 or 4 years. So there you go.
I would be open to that. I still feel like we'd need to get the last hit. Falsers, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think a lot of my hesitation to get on board with like this kind of brazen political tit for tat is in some of the language we're using to characterize it. So it feels a little too general for me to be comfortable with. And I'm with Stacks with like, there are places where we should use these vulnerabilities that the Republicans exploited, cite them back to them, and use them to our advantage in the next opportunity we get, like the Supreme Court situation, and then codify that gap that they exploited so it doesn't happen again, right? But that's one specific circumstance. And I think how much we do that is incredibly circumstantial. And I just feel very uncomfortable with like wholesale subscribing to they're doing it, so should we. I think that gets messy quick. And I think if we're not really precise about what we're talking about, why we're doing it, and how we're going to accomplish it, it gets pretty out of control.
I'll offer one that I think that I was just going to say that I, as somebody who is hyper partisan and definitely wants Democrats to fight back, I can give an easy one that I would never want Democrats to move on, which is the debt ceiling. I would never want Democrats to play chicken with the debt ceiling the way Republicans do, even when Republicans do it, because the risk is too great. That's one example where I would not go tit for tat. I would just say, we need to do something different. Invoke the 14th Amendment, do something, but I would not do tit for tat. Is there anybody here, is there like a hard line for anybody, like the debt ceiling for me, of where they would never want Democrats to pull a Republican tactic, be it with the courts, be it with whatever it is? Is there?
I mean, we could think of almost everything Trump has done.
Let's not do an insurrection. We could start there.
yeah, exactly.
I
don't think that Biden should just hold on to the nuclear documents after he stops becoming president. There's a lot of lines that I'm going to say, hey, actually, let's not go down this road.
I don't want Democrats to. I don't want another instance of JFK or Trump in office. I don't want them to point family members to positions of power, whether it's an advisory level or extreme necessary ambassadorships or whatever. I just want to clarify my position, though, because I think it might be getting lost or misunderstood. I'm not saying to do this because Republicans are doing this. I'm saying to do this because I think it is 100% necessary in order to tamp down on partisanship. And I believe this is the only way that we are going to get a constitutional amendment through at all to remove this power from Congress and party politics. I would have similar things in regards to things like redistricting. No more partisan redistricting. That is causing issues within the country. We're having our country be torn apart because the extremes are the only people that determine who wins an election in congressional seats because they're so gerrymandered. So these are things I think are needed to be done specifically to get those fixes that will make our country more stable. And I don't think it's going to happen any other way without some giant cudgel to get them to.
Yeah, you would need some sort of pain point to hold over Republicans.
Sure.
Well, not just Republicans, Democrats too. Like, there's going to be Democrats that won't want to be on board on this. I think if you get 20 senators, I don't care what party they are, and 20 senators can make all this happen.
Go ahead, Fresh.
Yeah, there's stuff that like are blatantly obvious that they know that they have advantages from that they don't. It's like not banning insider trading or the ability for them to everyone can agree that like if you're gonna point to a thing that's like both parties do, that's it. Like them
100%.
being able to have control of their own stocks while they're in office. Like that's a thing that both party does, and it's so obviously corrupt but they're the ones making the rules on it, so they're never going to change it because they're making money off it. It's how every single time they go in, they're always richer when they come out.
Yeah, that's the closest thing to a both sides issue. I think that's probably the big one because Nancy Pelosi has made a shit ton of money because of I don't know if you
insider
would,
trading.
Yeah, I don't know if you call it insider trading, but it's about as adjacent to it as you can possibly get. Sorry, somebody said my name.
Yeah, I just want to give you a really specific answer to the question you asked before we get too far along here. So, if I think we find a lot more really quality examples at the local and state levels for things that we could point to. So one that comes to mind for me, that a line that I would not want to reciprocate and cross that I think is really egregious and really bad, is what happened in Tennessee when they threw out Justin Jones, right? A duly and fairly elected representative, and they threw him out basically because they didn't like what he had to say and what he looked like, as far as we could tell. Like, there wasn't a lot there. And they disenfranchised all of those voters from who they elected, who turned around and put them right back in, and they're still trying to throw them out, right? I am not willing to back a philosophy of trying to do that to Republicans, because while I don't agree with Republicans and I don't agree with their platforms and I don't agree with their voters, I don't want to disenfranchise their voters. I do think the discourse is important. I think that, much like you, there is one side that is a lot more right than the other, both morally and usefully, right? But I don't want to disenfranchise people, and they seem very eager to do so.
Well, another good example with that is the Zoe Zephyr example, where I want to say it's like Minnesota. I don't remember where exactly she is.
I thought it was like Montana. Utah or Montana, something like that.
Yeah, Montana. Yeah, where she wasn't thrown out, but they just wouldn't let her speak, to the point where they had like hour-long meetings. They're like, well, why can't she speak? And they're like, we're making rules up as we go. Like, that's another example of things like
There was that one in
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania too. Do you remember that one, Fresh, when John Fetterman was the lieutenant governor and they wouldn't seat that? I think it was like in 2020.
Oh, was this when it was like split and they had the other guy standing there looking like a goofball because they both had the gavel?
I think so, but he won the election. They just wouldn't seat the Democrat.
Yeah.
They wouldn't seat him. And Fetterman was furious because he was the lieutenant governor presiding at the time. So, yeah, this is like a recurring thing that Republicans do. Now, that also opens an interesting question. We won't go do it now because we need to hear from Stacks and get to the comments, but about the 14th Amendment potentially disenfranchising Republicans by disqualifying Trump from the ballot. So, Falsers, put a pin in that. We're going to have to address that at some point. Stacks, go ahead, and then we have to.
Yeah, no, I have a question for you. Just a hypothetical. Let's say
Sure.
Biden it just started mentioning that he considers expanding the court, and Republicans sort of preemptively throw out this bill to say, hey, we're going to codify this rule. Actually, you're not allowed to expand the court. Would you be in favor of Democrats voting for it, even though it would sort of disadvantage them to do it right now, if that makes sense? Like, because you had questions about timing.
Sure.
I'm curious.
Basically, So basically, if Republicans tried to preempt Democrats' retaliation by saying, okay, we give up. Let's just keep things exactly as they are and enshrine it in law.
Yeah.
I would have to carefully consider it because again, I think it's not just like a reflexive tit for tat. I think it's bad for the country to constantly reward the GOP's bad faith by not taking away their advantage. I think it's incredibly important. It's not just like a reflexive anger thing. It's more like you all, again, violate the norms. You act in bad faith. You're bringing the country to these escalatory things. We can't just allow you to not only press your advantage, but keep the advantages, your ill-gotten gains, so to speak. We got to take some back to make the point here.
Yeah,
so I would have to think about it.
My only issue with that, I mean, I would say absolutely Democrats should vote for any sort of codification whenever it happens, even if it's a disadvantaged place. I think the main reason for that is I think everyone's always going to be in some sort of advantage, right? Whoever's president is probably going to be advantaged for expanding the court. And I do think, I don't know, I think that we can always cite that there's that thing. So I think we need to draw the line somewhere and say whenever we can codify is when we should codify.
Yeah,
Well,
again, I would
depends
think
on what
about it.
else
Sorry,
is
go
in the
ahead, Fresh.
bill. Like if it's just you can't expand the court, well, okay, what do you mean by like what is the language in it? And also, like, are you hiding? Oh, and also you cannot change anything with term limits, or you cannot introduce a code of ethics or whatever else, like kind of nonsense bullshit. Like, because you know how there's every spending bill and they're like, oh, Nancy Pelosi wants to spend $1 million on gay dance classes in California. Like it does. If it's just strictly language, like the bill is like a page long and it's that paragraph, like then it's a different conversation. It also depends on what else is in the bill.
Yeah, there's you'd have to look at the specific language. Okay. All right, so we will turn to comments now, and there are many. Okay, so first things first, this one, of course, I love because I'm very fond of this. It's embarrassing how Brazil banned Bolsonaro and locked up their insurrectionists already, and we haven't even gotten around to banning him from office yet. So just a quick recap. Brazil kind of experienced their own equivalent of January 6th. And by the way, Falsers, you are... does anyone see...
I don't know what's going on. I don't know what has happened.
Maybe you just bounce out and come back in again.
Yeah. If you want, we can hear you, but we cannot see you. Let me get rid of this guy real quick. Okay, so Brazil. So Brazil experienced their own equivalent or their parallel to January 6th. And I'm trying to find this comment. Where did it go? There's Falsers again. Yada.
All right, his back is good.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so Jair Bolsonaro is effectively Trump light. He lost his election in 2022 to Lula da Silva, and his supporters essentially rioted in both the legislative building, the executive building, and the judicial building in its capital, Brasilia. This was after Lula da Silva was inaugurated, so it wasn't quite like January 6th. It was after the fact.
Nobody was there.
Yeah, but it was a riot. Now, in response, Brazil, which is a democratic republic. There are obviously some differences between it and the United States. They acted much more aggressively. So they immediately suspended, then quickly fired the governor of the capital, Brasilia. They purged Bolsonaro loyalists in the government who they believe aided and abetted. The Supreme Court launched an investigation into Bolsonaro like a week later. Then they said that pending the outcome of the investigation, he is currently suspended from running for office for like 5 to 7 years. They are taking an infinitely more aggressive approach to dealing with their far-right authoritarian insurrectionists. So, does anyone want to jump in on this?
To be the most fair, and I'm only remembering this article like I'm half remembering this. The U.S. was actually kind of instrumental with how we dealt, or how Brazil dealt with their attempted coup, because it was 2022, so Biden was president, and like this had this got released like 6 months after the fact, but like we had the Defense Department, the State Department, and even the CIA go to the Brazil and say, hey, do not derail Brazil's democracy. We will respect whoever you choose, but if you attempt in any place to sort of derail this, you do not have U.S.'s support and you will not be our ally through this. And like they made it really, really clear. So I do think that the U.S. gets a little bit of credit when it comes to this, but it is fair that Trump's running again. So that's something worth saying.
Anybody else have anything to say on that, on the Brazil example? You don't have to. Again, the structure is a bit different, but I think it's great that they are taking a ruthless, aggressive, proactive effort. I do not think that they should take the feckless approach that Merrick Garland did with pursuing Trump out of a misplaced sense of trying to avoid impropriety. Merrick Garland got nothing for it. The idea like, hey, we got to be super extra, super duper, uber careful and give 2 years worth of consideration towards prosecuting Trump because we don't want to give the appearance that we're a biased Department of Justice. They think that anyway. So it's like, Garland, just sack up and do the right thing. A political consideration that Merrick Garland did, he politicized the Department of Justice, ironically, in his attempts to avoid the appearance of the Department of Justice being politicized. When you give somebody like Trump extra consideration that you never would anybody else, you have indeed politicized the Department of Justice. So shame on him. Let's see. Chris, again, good foil here. You all are defending Biden despite his decades-long history of lying and locking people up. I don't know what anybody want to jump in on that one?
Probably referring to the crime bill. I don't know.
And also, it's not relevant. It's not like we're not defending those policies. We're defending this impeachment. It's not relevant to what the discussion was. He's just like, he's said the summer of love like 4 times, and in reference to that, I do want to say, if you're one of those people who uses the phrase the summer of love, you also believe that Portland was burnt to the ground, in which case you need to give Joe Biden credit for having rebuilt Portland in 2 years. You can't live in your fantasy world and then try to do gotchas that don't make sense in reality.
Well, I think it's important, too, to call out that what he said is reframing what we were talking about. We were talking specifically about an impeachment, right? And then he gave an opinion on a piece of legislation, right?
Right.
So if there's something that happened in that legislation and him expressing his opinion about it that crosses a line of legality or rises to the standard of impeachment, great. Impeach him for that, too. Point to it and show us the legal precedent for moving forward and what the repercussions should be. But we both know that that's not there because you're reframing the discussion.
So let's see. Something else. Liberty Twitcher says, I don't think we're obligated to scrutinize Hunter, but it's obvious there's a lot of bad stuff with him. And if it includes his dad, then we got to know.
I don't even disagree. That's fair. I haven't really been doing a deep dive on what exactly Hunter Biden has done, but if he's committed a crime, let's indict him. Let's indict him.
Prosecute. He's currently being investigated by now a special counsel. It's ironic.
I have no issue with that.
Yeah, under a Democrat, there are more Democrats being investigated by special counsels than Republicans.
Can we also talk?
Yeah, I know what that one's about, though.
That one is just generally about the deal. And part of the reason, and this is from the whistleblower himself, either his note, it's one of them, either their notes or their own emails. Part of the reason that and this is something to be aware of in the future, that it is likely that the whatever the charges come down from this special counsel will not be what the Republicans want, which obviously is anything less than just Hunter Biden's penis plastered everywhere. He is, because there are issues with this case that are recognized by the Department of Justice and the FBI, being that Donald Trump was influential in interfering with this case, making it harder for that, and also the way that they handled his laptop. Now, for those of you who talk about, the laptop from hell, the laptop was hacked. Like, this isn't even like conspiracy theory. This is a well-documented fact that for multiple months, Hunter Biden's digital ID was hacked and stolen and then transmitted as this laptop. That the FBI had 10 months to look into this, and they never verified whether or not the information that we're looking at was the hacked information or his actual laptop. Like, there's different servers where they were getting this information from. This is well-documented stuff. Like, part of the reason he may have gotten away with some of the things, like the gun charge, which he's admitted to, is because some of the other things complicated other charges. And that is a thing that is a level of nuance that isn't going to be talked about when he inevitably doesn't get charged with first-degree treason and ordered to be hung, because that's what their goal is.
Well, he's already hung. That's the thing. So I will say, I will say too, to the point about the gun charge, it's important to remember that the ATF and the FBI very, 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 very ad infinitum rarely prosecute crimes related to like lying on a gun form unless the illegal possession of a gun it was also in commission of another crime. So there's actually some evidence to indicate that in some ways they were throwing the book at Hunter Biden in a way that they would not have your average Joe. Let's see here. We'll do Liberty Twitcher again. It's rather obvious that Hunter got rich by at least pretending he and his father would help people with stuff. So it's important we get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that. It's just, where is the actual crime?
Right, and eventually there has to be, I think, a limit.
It appears to be a peddling influence without registering as a foreign agent.
Right, but that's the FARA case thing is fine, and that's being pursued. But they're talking about did Biden help his son?
Right, and even this goes back to the Devin Archer thing. Like, if you believe Devin Archer when he says that he was on the phone, then you also have to believe Devin Archer when he says right after that, they didn't talk about any business shit or anything.
Right.
But see, they have an explanation for that. He went on Tucker Carlson shortly after and explained why his testimony was said in the way it was. Y'all, you got to understand, he was under oath in Congress. If he lied to Congress and said things that weren't true during Congress, he could probably go to jail. So absent that, if he's not under oath and now he's changing his story, he's probably lying.
Right. So let's see. Quesadilla 79 says Kushner couldn't get a classified clearance. Hunter never needed one. Yeah. So the intelligence community did not want to give Jared Kushner a security clearance because of his outstanding debt. They thought he would be a national security liability.
Was that Because I know he had to do it like a bunch of times. Was that really what it ultimately came down to? It
was, but then Donald Trump overrode the intelligence.
I know he overrode it, but like it was really the debt that he had to do it like 10 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was debt, not claiming all the stuff that he had done or his business interest in other countries. You know, it's just typical stuff. I don't believe
we're dealing with the dumbest fucking criminals, and they might get power again.
Yeah. 100%. So Axiom Razor says Freedom Caucus is bluffing. They would have removed McCarthy already if they were confident they'd get what they want. They're afraid of whoever the new speaker would be worse for them. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody followed this, but Matt Gaetz said in an interview that he will continue to threaten to issue a motion to vacate the chair for Kevin McCarthy unless McCarthy continues to cede to his demands. And I agree, they don't have the votes to remove him, but they're just going to try to be a pain in his ass every step of the way. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that particular point about the Freedom Caucus potentially trying to remove Speaker McCarthy?
They don't have the votes to replace him either. Like, we literally went through this like 15 times.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have, like Like, they don't have the votes. Like, honestly, I think if they tried to remove him, I think he might actually do the smart thing and go to the Democrats and be like, look, I cannot do this anymore. There's like basic shit that I have to get done. And like, just help me out with this basic shit. And we'll like, and then they'll go away. Like, we don't have to deal with them anymore.
That assumes McCarthy cares about governing, though, right? Like, McCarthy cares about having the gavel. That's all he cares about. He's been shooting for the gavel his whole life
so badly and be this miserable at it that you can't, on some level, be like, I gotta at least be like, I can't be the clown one for all time.
Nope, because he likes to point his picture in the wall in that fucking bar that he goes to and be like, I was speaker too.
You're like just above Kevin Hatcher. Like, you're like just above the guy who was a child in terms of how like historically effective you are.
He doesn't care. His name's still there.
Well, I was gonna say I'm gonna play the Staxium's enlightened centrist and actually say, yeah, I don't think McCarthy has any interest in like a robust governing agenda, but I do agree with Fresh that I do think there's he wants to continue to be speaker, which means on some level he has to deliver something like the government shutdown. I don't think Kevin McCarthy wants the government shutdown. He knows
they might get both.
He's gonna get both. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
And that's why he didn't win the speaker last time, because he went on TV and he said, yeah, we did Benghazi to hurt
Hillary.
He's objectively a stupid man. And he is less stupid than like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, but he is a stupid man and not a good politician. He just lives in a very red area of California.
What's hilarious is, so again, I don't know if Stacks and Falsers have been following this, maybe you have, but like, so the idea is that, obviously the Freedom Caucus, the far right flank of his party, the Trump supporters are saying, listen, we're heading for a government shutdown at the end of the month. We're not going to give you the votes you need to pass any legislation unless you agree to X, Y, and Z, such as you have to defund Jack Smith, the investigations into Donald Trump, and you have to impeach Joe Biden. So the calculus seems to be Kevin McCarthy's like, okay, I'll throw these people a bone. I'll announce an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, not an impeachment inquiry. Right. And then hopefully they will reward me by giving me the votes to avoid a government shutdown. But here's what's hilarious. During a government shutdown, not all the government shuts down. Essential functions continue to operate. And when it comes to Congress, not the executive branch, but Congress, it is the Speaker of the House which determines what functions are essential. So the Freedom Caucus could turn to say, no, we're going to continue with the shutdown anyway, because you will just determine that the impeachment inquiry into President Biden is an essential function, so it will continue to be funded. He has no leverage. He has absolutely no leverage. They can call his bluff and say, that's fine, we'll do a government shutdown because we didn't get this, this, and this. And as far as the impeachment inquiry is concerned, you'll continue to fund it because you can say you can deem it an essential function. This dude has no leverage whatsoever. This thing, by the way, as you know, will die in the Senate if it gets to an impeachment. Obviously, it will absolutely die. Yeah. And it may not get to a full impeachment vote. There are 18 Republicans in Biden districts. It's not good. What were you going to say first?
Even Ken Buck, who's a Freedom Caucus Republican, said he's not going to vote for it. Like he said, they don't have even the crazy vote.
Right. They don't have all of the crazy vote. You're 100% correct.
Kevin McCarthy strikes me as someone who has a lot more ego than he does strategic intuition, because I think you see him at the beginning of September start to signal some of the impeachment, right? And then he bound himself to that criteria of it will have a vote. And I think he genuinely thought he would be able to galvanize his party to get that vote through at the time. And he realized after he'd committed himself to that strategy with the Freedom Caucus that he couldn't. And so he had to trip over himself and roll that back and kick it out to committees. And that's not enough for them. So now they're coming at him. But you saw him kind of do the same thing in his inception as speaker too, right? So he was super confident he would have the votes, and then he didn't. And then he was super confident he could get them on board without making concessions, and then he couldn't. And then he was super confident that those concessions would not affect his ability to lead, and they are. It's over and over and over. Kevin McCarthy is a human comedy of errors that has not learned anything. And he, along with his party, are fractured and ineffective. And frankly, it's probably a good thing. for us.
Right.
No,
Oh,
100
yeah. It
Oh,
is.
it's so nice, legitimately. But I will say, to be a little the smallest of credit towards Kevin McCarthy, all he's doing. Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. You'll like this. You'll like this.
Oh.
I think all he's doing is betting that the Freedom Caucus aren't filled with sociopaths, and he keeps making the wrong bet.
That's
He's
the
just
that's the
can't-
criteria to
it
get
can't
in.
keep- it can't
He's
keep
literally
not
insane.
wanting
He
to do
keeps-
their jobs and just fracturing government at every spot. Eventually, they're going to want to do something, and he keeps betting that they're going to be reasonable, maybe not politicians, but at least people. And it keeps failing. It turns out that's just not the bet you can make with these guys.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is that just now occurred to me. He's also screwed in another dimension because he has to go for the impeachment vote after this. People say, well, like some of the Republicans are like, well, this is just an inquiry, you know, after we're done with the inquiry, you know, maybe the evidence vindicates Biden. And I'm like, no shot that your base will allow you to back off this at the end of an inquiry. They will have to go for an impeachment vote. What are they going to do? Do an impeachment inquiry for a month or 2 months and then say, actually, guys, you know what? We had this all wrong. Joe's all right. We're good. How do you think that would go over with their base? I think go ahead.
They're going to have to time it because the thing is, if they're going to bring it up for a vote, and the vote is probably going to fail. They have to try to figure out when the vote comes when it's most beneficial for Donald Trump. So that'll either be whenever he first goes to court for whichever, whether it's the DC case or it's the Georgia case. I think those are the most likely ones to go first. It'll either be then or it'll be around the time that like the first primaries for the Democratic Party start going, and they start doing that, and like, you know, RFK gets like 8% in like whatever the first state is, and they go, oh look, now we got to get Joe so that the next state hits him. Like they're gonna time it, and they're gonna fall flat on their. It's very dumb. Like there is no way this turns out good for them because they are being led by the dumbest people imaginable. And the only way to do this, I think it's Matt Getz, who's on Twitter, who wrote about this.
Gates,
the only way that this makes sense is if you have a PhD in Sean Hannity. And unfortunately for them, the American people don't, because Sean Hannity has lost his goddamn mind. And I say this as somebody who, when I was 12, went and got his signature because I used to be a big Sean Hannity fan.
Wow. Well, I was gonna make a joke about 12-year-olds and Matt Gaetz, but never mind. I will say that Matt Gaetz did actually have a really funny line on MSNBC about Kevin McCarthy. He was being interviewed by, I think it was Ari Berman on MSNBC, and Ari Berman played a clip of Kevin McCarthy, and they cut back to Matt Gaetz, and he said, Matt Gaetz goes, I don't know if you just played a clip of Kevin McCarthy or a commercial for low testosterone. Like it was actually a pretty sick burn for Kevin McCarthy. But anyway, so there is another one from Chris DeVera. Plus, this is how money management works. Saudis give him $2. He makes $1. He gives them an agreed portion of the earnings, basic stuff. So he's trying to justify the Saudi Arabia investment thing. Does anyone take issue with this? I would just say that Jared Kushner is not a real estate mogul.
No notes. This is how business works, guys. You know, you get $2 from the Saudi, you make $1. National security be damned, nepotism be damned, any of the shady business dealings be damned. He's absolutely right. This is just straightforward business.
Yeah, as somebody who worked in finance, this is exactly how it works. And also, the Saudis should give me billions of dollars because they'll obviously make $1 on their investment. Like, I don't understand how that works. If they give him $2 and he gives them back $1, that means they lost half of their investment. That means on top of being terrible at real estate, he's also terrible at money management, which wasn't a thing that he did anyway, which was why it was weird because they also gave Steve Mnuchin, I thought they gave him like 1.2. They gave him a fuck ton of money as well. And the bigger surprise was they gave it to Kushner, who had no experience in this.
Yeah, I will also say that the Saudi Wealth Fund, which like the financial advisors who advise Saudi Arabia, they also begged the Crown Prince not to make this deal with Jared Kushner because he didn't have the record to justify it. Let's see. Let's see. How about, again, a lot from Chris here. He's like the one right-wing foil in this. So he's talking about Trump accomplishments, because earlier in the conversation, they were
I don't
bring
even
this up?
disagree with this. I think that is a great Trump
Yeah,
accomplishment.
no. This was the one thing Trump did right. The problem with this comment, and somebody commented on this, is Chris is responding to me when I said, name a thing the current Congress has done that has benefited anybody's life. And every single thing that he commented on is a Trump era program.
Okay, that explains this comment here. Why is this guy being Chris citing a Trump era program in your question about what the current Congress is doing? Very true. Okay. Let's see.
I do love that, like, his only great accomplishment, I know this isn't really an answer to your question, but just on Operation Warp Speed, I do love that, like, the only good thing that Trump does, he immediately had to back off on it because his crowd just hated it.
Well,
there's
to be the first
brain.
step back was like a thing. That wasn't like terrible.
What?
The first step back wasn't like
Sure, and
Yeah,
like
I think
his
he's
China
talking about
relations
Warp
wasn't
Speed.
awful. Like I don't disagree.
But
That
like, that's like his crowning achievements that aren't like Republican fever dream things or tax cuts. Like that's it. It's Warp Speed and the first step back, and they hate the first step back because they think it raises.
Yeah, I was about to say that too.
Like they hate his accomplishments that were actually good things.
And they blame
the
Democrats for it too. So
like the First Step Act and the vaccine. It's just so bizarre. Let's see. Joan here says it's not performative to push back on Republicans using some of their tactics. You deal with a bully by letting them know that they finally met equal power, strength, as well as determination. Agreed, Joan. Based, Joan, as the kids say. Jackie Tupper says, can the Department of Justice go after Supreme Court justices that perjured themselves at confirmation hearing? Supreme Court justices are the Justice Department can indeed prosecute Supreme Court justices, but I don't think that it would technically be perjury.
Yeah, I don't think it counts as perjury either. I think they were asking. I mean, you could easily make the case, yeah, based off of my limited knowledge, but the more I dug into the issue is where I came to my current ruling. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's perjury. I think they were asked for their opinion, and your opinions can change.
Sure. This one's for Falsers. Falsers from Desperado Sensei, who had to leave, but there is no advantage, Falsers. Republicans cried decorum when in the minority, but ignore it the second they have a majority. Falsers, you've been called out, sir. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the time we're talking about and the issue we're talking about, right? So a lot of these things are cyclical. There's a lot of opportunities when the Republicans are holding power in Congress where they'll exploit these gaps if they can't push a vote through, or sometimes when they're in the minority. And then we'll roll over to the minority or the majority, and we'll have those same opportunities because we're in those same positions. I will say that it's certainly the case that Republicans breach these exploitations much more often than we do. They throw that first volley. And I think that's what people perceive as like that advantage that we're not taking, we're not weaponizing properly. But I would just go back to my earlier point of maybe it's the right thing to do, but it depends on the issue. I'm just not going to sign on wholesale.
I would also agree.
Filibuster is a good example of this. Like when the Republicans had the Senate, the Democrats were able to filibuster things. But I mean, the obvious argument is removing it does imply that it is removing a potential tool that you have as a minority.
100%. That's why I don't support just abolishing the filibuster. I think that's a terrible idea. I do think that there should be revisions made to the filibuster to make the problem with the filibuster in its current iteration is it's too easy to exploit. That's the problem. When you're a bad faith minoritarian obstructionist party like the GOP usually is, it's too easy to weaponize. The burden is then on the majority, the way that cloture rules currently are, the lack of standing requirements, the lack of you don't even have to stay on topic. You can literally read Green Eggs and Ham. It's too easy.
But do it. Do good. I don't care. Just make it at the very least a talking filibuster, if not a sliding scale.
100%. Like there have to be some changes to it because my thought is, at least as a general principle, if you have the option to filibuster a piece of legislation, then the burden should be on you to do it. It shouldn't be you can just threaten to do it and then you screw the majority the way it currently is. The majority should be the ones able to kick back while you struggle and stress to exploit the filibuster to your advantage. That's the way it should be if there's use for it. It is a tool, like Fresh is saying. Democrats have used that tool responsibly in the past to stop Republicans. So I don't want to just take it off the table. I just want to make it a bit more bad faith proof than what it currently is. Does anyone have anything they want to say about that before we move on?
I'm becoming less amicable to the filibuster existing as time goes on, because I'm becoming more amicable to just giant swings of where the country is and let it shake out quicker. The reason the filibuster exists is actually an accident. The reason the Senate exists is to slow things down, but that doesn't mean you have to slow things down additionally to that. So the filibuster itself is like a happy accident that people realize they could exploit for their own personal gain, and it gives far too much power to one senator, and it also makes it to where majoritarian rule simply doesn't exist. So for me, I think I'm more leaning towards the side of just get rid of it in general, and then be like, hey, if you're not with us on this legislation, you're not going to have any say, and then get compromised that way. So,
anybody else want to say anything about that before we move on?
It doesn't actually, just one further point, it doesn't actually encourage compromise. That hasn't been a thing since like the 60s.
Also, like the people who touted this the most, Joe Manchin and Sinema, like every time he brought his voters' rights bill, I don't think he got a single Republican on any of the bills that he said he was going to be able to compromise on, outside of like the infrastructure bill, which was their design in order to weaken Build Back Better.
Right.
Like the only time they got constituents is when it was fucking over people. Like they literally just doubled child poverty because they're terrible, awful people whose sole goal is to make children hungry.
100. So yeah. So Manchin's response to making a filibuster exception for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and a couple of others was, listen, we do need federal voting protections, but we can just compromise more, and we'll get our my good faith colleagues on the other side. And they didn't. You're right, Fresh. There was not a single, because again, Republicans have been very consistent about this. Trump has publicly spoken about this. Lindsey Graham has publicly spoken about this. Republicans know that if it comes down to majoritarian rule and popular votes, in their words, they lose every election.
Yeah.
So they have an investment in keeping things exactly the way they are. You can't compromise with that. Let's see here. Chris is complaining about
this is in response to the weather stuff.
Yeah,
I don't think we need to bring him up again for tonight.
Yeah. Let's see here. Martin says Republicans also like to make up rules that are inviolable until they aren't anymore, when it's advantageous to ignore it.
I mean, a perfect example. We already went over this example, but we can go over it again. When they had Garland, they said, "Hey, I think it's the rule they came up with is the fourth year of any presidency is when you have to wait until the next year.
Yeah, a year out of an election, I think.
So they stalled the whole thing out, and then when it was Trump's fourth, because that was Obama's fourth year, is Scalia died, and then Trump nominated Gorsuch. Thank you, Gorsuch. And then so Trump got in power, and then
Kavanaugh.
Was it Kavanaugh?
Yeah, it was Gorsuch and Kavanaugh.
No, but it was ACB. That was the
last
fourth
one.
year. Yeah. So the fourth year. Anyway, basically they had a rule and they just said, fuck it, this benefits me to ignore this rule that we very clearly set up. And then they tried to like ad hoc justify it again by saying, oh, well, it was the fourth year of the second term as opposed to the first. And it's like, you didn't even mention that the first time.
They tried to rationalize it after the fact by saying, well, that was when the Senate was controlled by an alternate party, and this time the Senate.
Oh yeah, that's right. It was just like a whole bunch of like.
Well, no, that was when there was a waning gibbous moon the night before, and this is a leap year, and just the calculus is totally different. It's just such BS. So there's a really good last question that I want to end on. But before we jump to it, since we all talked about the courts, I'm just gonna. There was one example too that I was gonna ask you all about. Does everybody here know what the blue slip is? If not, okay. So the blue slip is the idea in the Senate Judiciary Committee. A blue slip allows a senator in a state where there's a court vacancy, a district or circuit court vacancy, basically, when the president offers a nominee to fill that vacancy, the senators in that state, by tradition, can veto it. They're like, it doesn't matter what party it is. So if it's a Republican president and they want to fill a vacancy, and there's a Democratic senator, and the Democratic senator says, no, this doesn't work for me, the president has to give a different nominee. And somebody has the stream up because I can hear an echo.
Yeah, we're hearing the echo.
Testing.
It's still there.
Testing. It's Cypher. Say something, Cypher.
I don't have any of the streams.
I have everything muted. So
Testing.
it's not me.
Okay, it went away when you muted it. But anyway, now it's gone again. So that was the blue slip tradition. No rule. It was just a tradition. When Trump took the Senate and the presidency in 2016, 2017, Republicans took the blue slip away for district court judges. They're like, listen, it doesn't matter if a Democrat says, no, I don't want this nominee, pick a different one. If the president wants it and we've got the votes for it, that's who's going in that slot. And so when they lost the majority in 2020 and Biden won the presidency and Democrats took the Senate, they were pissed because then Biden was putting his nominees, even if like Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee didn't want that particular nominee. She was very, very upset. So my first question is, because Sheldon Whitehouse and other Democrats were like, listen, you made this rule change. We begged you not to do it. And now we're in the majority and you don't like it, but we begged you not to change at the time. We're not going to have a rule where the blue slip exists when Republicans are in power, or not when Republicans are in power, but only when Democrats are in power. Do you think Sheldon Whitehouse was right to do that, to say, hey, we warned you, we're not going to have a double standard here, and if you can do it, we're going to do it to you? Does anyone have an issue with that?
I just have an issue with just the existence of it. It sounds like its whole thing is designed in order to stymie the.
We got the echo again.
Yeah.
It's you.
Me?
No, it's fresh faces.
I don't have anything else up. I literally have 2 Pinterest tabs up.
Yeah, but
Planning out your wedding. Say something now.
Is it still up?
No, okay. So it went away again. All right, so you were saying.
No, like, it just seems like it's a way for them to stymie the pick so they can get whoever they are. Like, no, obviously, if they're gonna. This is the same thing that they argued when we nuked the filibuster for judges. Obviously, there's more to it because they were slowing down the literal function of government in order to do this. But like, yeah, you can't have one set of rules for one people, and a different for somebody else.
Cypher, Falsers, Stacks, does anyone challenge that? Okay. Falsers, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think the Justice Department as a whole, and like putting in judges in the Supreme Court, that's probably the best place we can point to for some of these like reciprocal efforts where it's appropriate, because the consequences of putting those people in place are generally super long standing, and it's super hard to course correct once they're there. So yeah, fair play on that. But I do think like it's important for us to contextualize where the Democratic Party is versus the Republican Party. And even though the Republican Party is doing some pretty egregious shit as a whole, we're still in an okay spot in the grand scheme of things with how voter bases are trending and how policy is popular or not between the two parties. Like, the Republican Party really doesn't have a great central platform, and they put all their eggs into the Donald Trump basket, and it has bit them in a really big way. And so they have a lot of ground to make up to galvanize any sort of serious resistance, I think. And so all that to say, I don't think we really need to compromise and tit for tat on a lot of these issues, Justice Department things withstanding usually.
Let me give you another. Well, that was the reason I was bringing that up was, so here was the second part of it. So that was, Republicans started this with revoking the blue slips when it was convenient for them for district court judges. Now the blue slips still exist for circuit court judges, or maybe I have it backwards. It's one of the two, but the blue slips are still in place for the other. It's either district or circuit. And Republicans have been using it to their advantage by basically blocking several of President Biden's nominees by withholding their blue slip, by not giving permission. And so many progressives, myself included, are saying, okay, Dick Durbin, Senate Democrats, get rid of the blue slip. They did it for one to press their advantage. Now, again, we owe them one. They're blocking us again, as Fresh pointed out, when we first changed Senate judiciary rules for federal judges under Obama. It was because Republicans were constantly blocking President Obama's nominees. So we changed the rules. It's like, hey, if you don't stop cock blocking us, so to speak, we're going to have to change the rules to get things through. They did it to us with blue slips already for one set of judges. Now we should do it again so we can get President Biden's nominees through. And I'll give you a great example of where the failure to do so has potentially bit us in the ass. The judge who is presiding over Donald Trump's case in Florida won that randomly because there are so many vacancies in Florida because Republicans have refused to give the blue slip. That Trump-appointed judge, Aileen Cannon, would probably not be presiding over his case if President Biden had been able to ram through more judges in Florida. So that's a great example of where that's probably going to bite us in the ass in a spectacular way because she is predisposed in a way that favors Trump. So my position is, fuck the blue slip, get rid of it. Republicans have done it before. Let's do it again. Let's get as many judicial appointees as we possibly can because we don't know what the next term will bring. We have no reason to believe that Republicans will honor the blue slip for circuit or district court judges, whichever one it is, when they're in power because they already revoked it before. Does anyone have any thoughts on that as that example, that very specific real world, non-hypothetical example?
They'll probably get rid of it next time they're in power anyway. So my only thought would be like, if you're gonna do it, don't do it like in like a potentially lame duck session. Like either do it now or wait till the next one when either you're still in power, because I don't know if we'll ever talk about this week or another week, but like you do it when you have the full 4 years or they're going to do it. Like it will not. It's one of those things that just like with the Supreme Court filibuster, everyone knew that was going down as soon as they took enough power and had a Republican president. This appears to probably be like anything that can interfere with a potential majority for them to ram through, they're going to remove.
Codify it or move on. That's my position. Either get it in place where people have to abide by this set of rules and standard, or if you're not going to do that, move on, because the Republican Party damn sure will.
So you wouldn't have an issue with that either codify it, that this is going to be a thing that neither party can revoke, or what's good for the goose is good for the gander and get rid of it to use it to our advantage?
On this issue, there's no point in me taking issue with it because, again, the Republican Party they're not going to have a problem when they have the opportunity taking advantage of it and doing so. So if it's not codified, and if we're not going to make a move to cement this as something people have to abide by, then we should, in this case, play by the same rules they are, or we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Cypher, Staxiums, either
No, I agree
on that? So we'll wrap up with this. There was a big question there at the end. We're actually going to hold it for, I think, next week because it's a lot to get into, and it's about Project 2025, which is going to be the Trump administration's attempts to shred separation of powers and checks and balances. It's a huge thing, very fascistic. It deserves its own topic, so we'll wait till next week. So then I'll throw it back to Cypher and Fresh on this because, and again, we got to go to Chris on this one. Fresh and Cypher, I think it was Fresh who pointed out that, or maybe it was False, or somebody pointed out that the Democrats and progressives are more popular in terms of policies. And Chris is like, have you seen the polls? So does anybody want to address that, the idea that Democrats and the left don't have generally more popular policy prescriptions than the right and the Republicans?
No, like literally just learn how to fucking read. It literally, it's that simple. Like when we were doing Build Back Better, it's socialism. It had like the smallest one polled at like 56% or some shit. Like literally just learn how to read a fucking poll. And if you're talking about the 2024 polls, we're a year and a half out. I think the same polls had Romney beating Obama by like 13 points or some shit. Like there's too much, first of all, especially for this election, like where if Donald Trump may be the nominee, or he may have enough votes and they pick somebody else because his ass is going to jail. Like, you cannot guarantee anything with these polls. It's too far out.
Falsers, were you going to say anything?
Yeah, so the Brookings Institution put forth a study from Pew Research. I think it was done in like 2022, where they looked at voters from ages 18 to 44 of both Democrats and Republicans, people that self-identified as these things. And what they found was pretty damning for the future of the Republican Party and their voter base. So I think what has happened during the Trump era is all the Republican positions became so extreme that you guys have galvanized us in a way that we've never been galvanized before. We no longer have these disagreements and factions as heavy as we did before about the degrees of a policy, because damn, we just want like basic abortion rights for women, right? We just want that to be there at its foundation. We're not having discussions about like the timeline or how many weeks anymore, because you guys are really attacking like the base right. So the Democratic Party was super united in this with their voters. And what they found with the Republicans of this age range is the younger generation had these big policy gaps. I think it was like, hold on, I got my notes here. It was 14% of variation in their agreement with like the older generation and where they stood on policy and the younger generation. The Democratic Party, the people that identified as Democrats, they were like 2%. So you've got this big misalignment, and there's also a lot less enthusiasm with that voter block. They were like 8% less likely to have been registered, like 15% less likely to have voted. The Republican Party and their base is really fractured in some ideological camps, some of them behind Trump, some of them not, and it's really damaging for them. You guys have an old voter base. You can shout, look at the polls, and try to cherry pick data all you want. This has been going on for decades. There is an overwhelming amount of data that supports the older voter base has been traditionally conservative, and that base is dying out, right? Like COVID devastated it. It's only getting a little smaller every day, and the further down you go in the generations, the bluer it gets. So I don't know what you guys do to solve that, other than either you win on the fascism gambit that you're making, or you adopt some policies that people actually can get behind.
Yeah, and unlike in previous generations, just to put a pin on your point, Falsers, we aren't getting more conservative. Millennials are staying relatively liberal, even though we're starting to own property, even though we're starting to form families. The gap there is that people with kids tend to be a bit more conservative, especially if they have many kids, than people who don't have kids. So there's a gap there, but it isn't much of anything. And then I'm seeing that Chris is saying Gen Z is more conservative than ever. No, Gen Z is like capitalistic, but when it comes to like social policy, they're not. They're not at all.
Wait, Gen Z is more conservative, probably sick of all the pride stuff. Was in the poll recently that like 25% of Gen Z is queer? Like,
it's people that don't understand how to read data. It's like more conservative than ever compared to what? It's probably like themselves compared to 2 years ago or something.
There was acknowledge that the world is actually getting more left, so you just have to delude yourself into a world where you're actually winning. It's sad. It's sad.
They don't understand how data works. There was Charlie Kirk had this poll or something. Maybe it was the post millennial or something, that like 41% of New Yorkers want a wall. It's like, okay, that's still a massive minority. Like
what I'll also say is that sometimes they'll just do like a Twitter poll where like Charlie Kirk or something will just do a Twitter poll. Hey, are you super young, and do you like the right or something like that? And it's like 80-90% is on the right. I'm like, okay, well, only your audience fucking voted, dumbass. Like, there's
you know what? I want to change my position really quick, and I want to agree with Chris, and I want to encourage him and the Republican Party to adopt that stance and go and open up voting in colleges and drive college voting. Let's get those conservative Gen Z voters to the poll. Let's make sure that happens. I'm behind it, 100%.
It's weird that we keep disenfranchising them. Isn't that weird that like one of the presidential candidates wants to raise the voting age to 25? That seems like that would be just counterintuitive, like completely going against everything that if they're all Republicans, you'd want them to vote. I don't understand.
Yeah, that's Charlie Kirk's entire job is to get them out. Like, are you going to put Charlie out of a job?
It's a good point. All right. Well, we've hit that 2-hour mark. So we discussed all kinds of things. Again, we'll probably next time I'd like to talk about Project 2025. And again, if anyone wants to bring other things to the table as well, but that definitely merits a substantial conversation. So we're going to, I guess, shout everything out, like final thoughts about we talked about courts and norms and the Biden impeachment. We'll go with Staxium's first, then Falsers, Cypher, and then Fresh.
This is just a shout out. Like, what are we just doing?
If you want to offer your final thoughts, and again, shout yourself out.
I don't know if I have any final thoughts.
You didn't have any beginning ones. You've
yeah,
just been
true. I'm just here to
You've just been eye candy the whole time, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's very cute. But yeah, if you want to see more of my pretty little face, you can go on. I'm Staxiums everywhere. Mostly post on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube are like sort of my main ones, but I'm sort of everywhere. The Biden impeachment has almost no merit to it, but I'm excited to see whatever the Republicans can cobble together. I'm sure it'll be very enlightening to their voters.
All right, Falsers.
Again, I think the Republican Party has some core issues that they don't have a quick and easy solution to. They align themselves behind an ideologue, and they have failed to develop policies as a contingency to that are worthwhile to a voter base, such that will give them enough votes to really make ground without tyranny. So all that said, I'm not a content creator. Once again, there's not really any where you can find me other than Twitter. My Twitter name is the same as on here. Feel free to reach out to me on there.
Perfect. All right, Cypher.
Yeah, I am also looking forward to what the Republicans come up with, because I'm sure it'll be a grand old time in the clown car. But if you want to find what I have to say, you can find me on Twitch and YouTube under the moniker of Crowdsourced Politics. I typically do a Thursday news roundup show, trying to beat the big names to it, to where we give you kind of the analysis only the crowd can provide. So thank you again, Josiah, for having me on here, and I look forward to joining you again.
Be awesome. All right, Fresh.
Look, we'll probably see like more revenge porn for Hunter Biden. That seems to be the go-to. Just in general now, because there's that congresswoman in Virginia that they're doing it to. They got nothing. It'll be interesting to see basically how. Yeah, I think there's debate coming up soon. I don't remember when the second one is. That'll be fun.
If we can time that.
On a different note, the new booster's coming out soon. Please go get it. I don't want to have to start dragging people off to the hospitals again. I mean, I say again, but I wasn't the EMT when the first one hit. But seriously, go get it. COVID is coming back. If you live, especially if you lived in Florida or Ohio and you're a Republican, you died at a 43% higher rate than Democrats did in the last wave. Don't do that. Go get vaccinated, and you can follow me on Twitter, which is basically where the only place I am, unless you find me on random other podcasts, at Fresher Ideas New.
Real quick before we go, so Cypher pointed out in 2 weeks is the next GOP debate. That is definitely what we got to do. We definitely got to cover the next GOP debate, because it's 2 weeks from today.
Yeah,
that'd be good. Yeah,
it's gonna start before I'm gonna work. I'm gonna get
I don't know when it'll start. I thought the last one started about the time we started. I thought the last one was like 9 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah,
I think it was 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern
or something, and I'm gonna be stuck at work.
Yeah, I hope not. Stacks, you were gonna say something before we dip?
No, we want to hear what where our audience is from. So please get COVID so that we can sort of track your locations through the chip that gets through. Because we really want to find out what exactly makes you guys tick. So please get those boosters.
Yeah. All right, folks, I appreciate it. We're going to do this again probably next week. I'd like to make this a weekly thing if at all possible. This was, again, a bit impromptu in terms of like the topics and everything. A lot of us have a bunch of different things going on, but we're going to try to make it more formal and more, I don't know, concrete as we go along. This is like a rough draft, but I had a lot of fun. And we'll see you all next Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the comments, including Chris. Even though you can't read a poll, and even though you are absolutely in denial, man, I appreciate your YouTube comments, and I appreciate you joining us for this. You and Fresh, especially, I feel like forged a very close bond. You and Cypher as well. So I think you three made like a really close friendship there, Cypher and Fresh and Chris. So, all right, folks, I appreciate it. So I'm ending the